Hello, good evening. Well, thank you, Olivia. That's my niece there. This, preparing for this evening tonight has been, like Sharon said, quite a challenge for me. I want to thank Sharon for the beautiful introduction. And I want to thank the Foothills Community Action Partnership excuse me, and the Youth Investment Project for having me here tonight. And thank you all for all the work that you do. But yeah, I've performed in Rupp Arena next door. And I performed in front of big crowds, but I don't have a lot of experience in public speaking. So this will be my first experience in public speaking, and it's a challenge. And I thank Sharon for once again challenging me to do something new and different. If I get emotional, if I get emotional as I'm sharing with you tonight, just bear with me, please. I would like to begin with a quote that I discovered while doing some research for tonight. Success is not measured by what you accomplish, but by the opposition you have encountered and the courage with which you have maintained the struggle against overwhelming odds. Excuse me. And that is a quote from Orison Swett Marden. Another true but interesting quote I found was, "The only place you'll find success before work is in the dictionary." And I thought that was pretty funny, but very true. I'm not really here tonight to give a speech. I've tried to put down an outline to tell you a little bit about my story and where I came from to where I am today. And I'll try to stay on my little outline here and not ramble too much. But Sharon told me when she was inviting me here that one of the themes tonight and for the competition was the steps to success. And success, I think, means different things to a lot of people. To me, success means maintaining a healthy body and mind, giving and receiving love, and being able to earn a living doing something that you enjoy, something that you love. And to me, if I can maintain all those things throughout my life, I feel like that I will have been a success. So I put together a little list of things that I thought were steps to success. I look back on my life and the things that I've done in my life, and I didn't really know I was doing them at the time, but now that I look back, I see how I accomplished my goals, some of my goals. I think the important thing is, as I said earlier, when I was younger, I thought if there's some way I can make a living doing something that I like, then it wouldn't be work. Then I wouldn't be always looking at the clock, wondering when the quitting bell was going to ring, or dreading getting up and going to work. So I think I would like to ask you all tonight to ask yourselves what your passion is. What are your hobbies? What are some of the things that you like to do that when you're doing them, you lose all track of time. You get so lost in it that you're not looking at the clock. You're not thinking about anything but what you're doing, because you love it and because you enjoy it so much. And my hobbies, like Sharon said, I grew up here in Kentucky. My hobbies, I grew up until I was 10 years old in Mercer, and 9 years old in Mercer County in Harrodsburg. We lived on a little farm. And then my father got this great job opportunity. We moved up to the Appalachian Mountains in the Daniel Boone National Forest, and he got a job at the Cathedral Domain where he was a camp manager there. And he was a jack of all trades. He could pretty much do anything. He was a construction worker before he got this job at the Cathedral Domain. And my brothers and I would do everything from mowing the grass to cleaning the toilets to helping, you thought that was funny, to cleaning the cabins and to help serve dinner. We'd lead hikes, we'd lifeguard. We'd do all kinds of different stuff up there at the camp. And some of my hobbies when I was little, I was playing football since I was 7 years old. I played football for Sharon's husband, Hoover Niece, and with her son, Jeremy Niece. We'd ride motorcycles, go mudding and four-wheeling up in the hills. But one thing that moving to that camp did for me is it gave me access for the first time to a piano. There was a rec hall downstairs in the apartment that we lived in at the camp. And I would go down there and I would tinker around on it and play and just try to pick things out that I'd heard on the radio. And my mother and my father always had a passion for music. There was always music in the house. My mother would sing at church and perform solos at church. At Christmas time, our whole family would sing Christmas carols in harmony. You would have thought it was the Osmond family Christmas show or something on TV. But we always got together and we always sang. And music for me was something that when I did it, I got completely lost in it. Football, I loved it, but I didn't love going to football practice. That's for sure. And I remember my freshman year, Hoover had just retired, and my brother had graduated. My brother Tim had graduated Estill County High School. My brother, they used to call him Tomcat, and he was the high school quarterback. And when he left, and I was always Tomcat's little brother, and I always hung out with all my brother's friends and wanted to, excuse me, wanted to be like them, wanted to hang out with the big guys. And when he left, and my first year in high school was one of the hardest times for me, because I guess I realized maybe what a brat I'd been to all my brother's friends, because they were kind of hard on me my freshman year. I felt like at football practice, they hit me a little harder. And so that freshman year was a tough year for me, and there was a point during the year that I wanted to quit. And I remember one of the things that my brother and Coach Niece would talk about is, you don't want to be a quitter. But up up until that point in my life, I always loved football so much, and I couldn't figure out why it was no fun to me anymore. And so one day I was at school. I was dreading football practice, and I called home and asked Dad if he could come get me. I was sick, and I wanted to go home. And I'd done this a couple of times, and so Dad came. He's like, okay. He came and got me, and we, on the way home, he's like, son, are you really sick? And I'm like, no, Dad, I don't know what's going on. I hate football. I don't like it anymore. It's no fun to me. And for the first time, I don't want to play it anymore. And I said, but I don't want to be a quitter. I don't want people to think I'm a loser. I don't want to be considered a quitter. And he said, well, son, I'll love you either way. I'll love you whatever you decide. If you want to quit, you can quit. But whenever you start something, you should always finish it. And so that was a big lesson for me. So I had Dad turn the truck around, and he took me. The school was already over. He took me to the locker room. I got suited up, and I went out on the field, and I finished playing that year, my freshman year. But the next year, I decided not to play because I just, for some reason, and I don't know whether it was the work, and that's another thing. Comes back to the quote I was saying, success before work. I mean, you can't have any glory if you don't sacrifice. And you got to practice every day on that football field before you can suit up and run out on that field under the lights. And so the next year I didn't play. And I think one of the reasons that, and this is key, because my brother played football for Hoover, Sharon's husband. And that year, he wasn't the coach. And so the next year, I decided not to play football. But then my junior year, I heard that Hoover was going to come back and coach. And I missed playing football my sophomore year. So I decided to come back and play, and I enjoyed it. And I guess that was just a growing phase I was going through in my life. But it was a very hard time for me because I grew up having two big brothers. They had left home to pursue their things in life, and I was kind of left to make my own path. I thought I had to fill my big brother's shoes, but I didn't really have to fill his shoes. I just had to make my own path. And so one of the hobbies of mine or passions of mine that I really got back into was music. And Sharon actually is responsible for one of my first performances in front of a crowd. She was the, I guess you would call it, chairman of the FLO, the Friends for Life organization. And they were raising some money so that after the prom that year, we could have a lock-in at the school. And everybody at the school, everybody went to the prom, would change their clothes out of their tuxedos and their prom dresses and come in and play games and stay the whole night. So keep kids off the road and keep everybody out of trouble. So she asked me if I would do something for the talent show. And I'd been in chorus. I'd been in chorus at the high school. I'd been in the choir at church. And so I said, sure, I'll do something. And what started out as one song ended up to be about 4 or 5 different songs in that talent show. And I was scared to death. And Sharon would be like, well, now we don't have a lot of people in the show this year, so feel free to do, another number if you want. And I was like, oh, okay. And so, I said, I'll do 2. And she's like, well, now you can do more if you want. And so I think I ended up doing 3 or 4, but I was worried that people would get tired of looking at me and think it was I was trying to be like, make it the Kevin show instead of the Flo talent show. But that was a time that I really discovered being in front of a crowd and performing and playing music, because before that it had been in church and singing in the choir and stuff, and in our youth group and singing at revivals and stuff. And so that's when I discovered, hey, man, if I could do this and make a living at it, that'd be pretty cool. So I'm getting a little long-winded here, guys. I'm sorry. I'm barely through most of my notes here. I apologize. So then I'm like, okay, if I'm going to make this my career, if I want to make this my career, how do I make that happen? So after I graduated high school, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to college. And I didn't want to go to college until I knew what kind of field I wanted to go into. What Sharon didn't mention earlier is that I wasn't real, she was my algebra teacher. I wasn't real good in algebra. But she helped me, and I got through it. But so after high school, I was working odd jobs. I was housing tobacco, baling hay. I worked at Druthers in Irvin as a fry cook, making French fries and cooking burgers. And then I got a job. I moved in with my brother, and then I got a job up here in Lexington as a salesman, which is something that I just do not enjoy doing. I was going to people's houses for evergreen lawns, measuring their yard. I was supposed to knock on their door, but after getting ran out of people's yards 3 or 4 times, I kind of gave that up. I would just hang the estimate on their door and carry on my way. And I couldn't stand that job. And I had a conversation with my dad, tell him, I was making decent money, but I was talking to my dad about it. He's like, son, you're young. You don't have any responsibilities. You can work anywhere. He's like, I'm not trying to get rid of you, but why don't you just take off? Go see what's out there. And so on a lunch break one day with my best friend that worked at Evergreen Lawns with me, we were at Pizza Hut, all-you-could-eat buffet. And I said, man, because I had heard that down in Florida, because of Walt Disney World and Universal Studios and the cruise line industry, that there was work for singers and entertainers. And I'd gotten some gigs in Irvin singing at weddings, and there was a restaurant in Irvin called Cedar Village that I played piano at a couple times, and they'd pay me a little bit. So I was like, if I could move down there, maybe I could get a job at Disney, and who knows? Opportunities might be down there. So my buddy Jimmy, we were at lunch at the all-you-could-eat Pizza Hut buffet, and I said, man, and we had just gotten paid too. We just got our paychecks. We had about $300. I had $300 and he had $300. I'm like, man, why don't we just pack up and take off and go to Florida? It's getting ready to be summertime. We could maybe get a job at Disney. It'd be fun. Who knows? And he's like, I don't know about that. I'm like, come on, man, we can do it. Because I didn't have a car at the time. I was riding with him to work. And I needed his car to do it if I was going to do it. So we went back. We finished that day's work. We went back to work, gave our notice, got our paychecks, went to his house, loaded up his El Camino, 1978 El Camino, drove up to halfway in between Irvin and Betaville where the Cathedral Domain is, drove up, pulled up, went inside, told Mom, told Dad that I'm moving to Florida. My dad was excited and happy, and my mom just started crying. So I'm kind of getting off track here in my outline, so I want to backtrack a little bit. My first point in what I think are the steps to success is finding your passion. My second point was setting a goal and making a plan. So me moving to Florida, my goal was to get a job in the entertainment business and be able to make a living at it. And my plan was to move to where I thought opportunities were prosperous, where opportunities were abundant, where I could get work. So me and my buddy Jimmy moved down to Florida. Sharon asked me, all I had to do was talk for 20 minutes, and I'm really getting long-winded here. I'll keep going on. I'm going to keep pushing through it. Moved down to Florida. He had $300, I had $300. We put in applications at the mall. We put in applications everywhere we saw a sign hiring. We put in applications, and we put in applications at Walt Disney World. Walt Disney World had already had their hiring for entertainment, their auditions for the year. So I couldn't get a job as a performer there, but they had openings in the backstage studio tour at Disney MGM Studios. So I auditioned for that, got that job. So we had jobs, but we didn't have a place to live yet. So we looked in the newspaper for apartments, and they were just crazy expensive. We'd spent a lot of our money to get down there. So we were trying to find a place to live, and we found a place in Kissimmee, Florida, Kissimmee, St. Cloud area, just outside of where Walt Disney World is, where a man and a woman had a little house behind their home that his mother-in-law at one time lived in, and it had a bed, and it had a bathroom, and it had a little kitchenette. So we found that place to live. We paid a month's rent on it to get us to where we could get our checks coming in from Walt Disney World. But we didn't have any money for gas or groceries. So we looked in the newspaper, and there was a work service that just hires people for the day. It's like a temp service. They'll put you out on a construction site. They'll have you in an office answering phones, whatever. So, and they were paying, it's a work service, and they were paying like $4.50 an hour, plus they take a commission. And we're like, we can work there a couple of days, get some gas and groceries. We'll be set until we start working at Disney, and our checks start coming in. So that's what we did. And when we went out there, they took us to a construction site because we were some of the youngest guys there. And they gave us 2 jackhammers, and we busted up concrete all day on a construction site. That was one of the hardest jobs I've ever done in my life. When we got home that night, my arms and my elbows and my chest felt like they were still vibrating. So on to Walt Disney World. Started working at the backstage studio tour. I'd give a guided tour of the backstage studio area. I'd have a shuttle full of people, and I'd be on the microphone, and I'd say, "Good afternoon, welcome aboard. Welcome to the backstage studio tour. My name is Kevin. I'll be your tour guide on this guided tour through Walt Disney MGM Studio and movie-making magic." So that's how I'd start my tour, and it was like a half-hour guided tour, and I had a lot of fun. I met a lot of great people there, had a lot of fun. But my ultimate goal was to get in the entertainment department. That was my ultimate goal. So they finally had auditions coming up, but they weren't for singers or actors or anything. It was for character entertainment. You know, the people that get in the costumes. So, and they had a show there for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I saw the show. It was a pretty good show. They got up there and they did some martial arts. They danced, and it was a pretty good show. And the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were like rock stars at that time. I mean, they were huge. This was in 1990, 1991. I mean, they were the biggest thing on the planet. So I auditioned and got a job as a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. And I wore a costume that weighed about 35 pounds. And we're in Orlando, Florida. I mean, I was in the best shape of my life. It was like being in a sauna every day. I was out there on stage. We do a 5-minute show. We do an autograph signing session. And you don't know how many fights that I witnessed between parents because their kid, well, you can't stay out there all day. We'd be out there, we'd do a 5-minute show, and then we'd take pictures and sign autographs. But, like, you know, you've got people from all over the country and all over the world, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are the most incredible thing at the time, and they want their kids to get a picture with a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. So, anyway, that was an incredible experience. I got to pretend I was a rock star. I was in a costume. Nobody could see me, but I was pretending I was a rock star. I was signing autographs and taking pictures, and so that was an incredible experience for me. I also was Tigger. Got to play Tigger at Walt Disney World. I got to play Sweetums from the Muppets, that big hairy thing with the big mouth that flaps. And that was, working at Walt Disney World was such a great experience. I woke up and never dreaded going to work. I had a great, great time there. Just some of the best memories of my life. Not a lot of responsibility, you know, just pay the rent check, and I did manage to finally save up and buy myself a hoopty. Because me and Jimmy only had one vehicle, and sometimes he'd work the night shift, and sometimes I'd work the morning shift, and you know, I'd have to drive him in and then go hang out in the park all day until my shift started, and then he'd have to come back and pick me up later. So we were having to share a vehicle, and that got old. So I finally got me a hoopty and got things going. But while I was working at Walt Disney World, one night my mom called, and she She told me my father wasn't doing very good. My father had been diagnosed with colon cancer, and they hadn't told me. They just said he had a little procedure done. They hadn't told me that he had cancer. But my mom called and she's like, "Son, we didn't want to worry you, but the operation your father had was colon cancer, and he's been doing chemo, and everything looked great, but he's not doing so hot. So you may want to think about coming home." So I went home and saw him, and he hadn't been out of the bed in weeks. He got up and met me at the door. Because he didn't want me to worry. And so, after staying a week or so,